Hello again, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Midwest Ag This Week. I'm Stu Ellis, taking care of the chores today for a great program. We're going to talk to you about getting higher yields on both corn and soybeans. We'll visit a small town where something big is happening, thanks to farmers. Extension wants to know what farmers are really needing, and you'll meet a very special lady. All of that and more right now.
Welcome to Midwest Ag This Week with host Stu Ellis.
Well, we have corn and soybeans really planting at the same time anymore. But right now, there's some folks who are going to be planting soybeans a little bit ahead of corn in an effort to get a jump on growth and higher yields. But the earlier you plant, the risk increases with disease, fungus, insects. And Illinois Soybean Association CCA envoy Jason Carr says a good seed treatment is a must.
Make sure you have a good quality seed treatment on there, because those beans are going to encounter more stress. I mean, we've seen them sit in the ground for 50 days and still come out and emerge and be, actually that was 2 years ago, it took over 50 days to germinate or to emerge, and we saw that be the highest yielding planting date. So even with reduced stands, so the seed treatment is important. Another thing that is fungicide. So I think a lot of soybean farmers are using fungicide on their beans and they've seen the value. I was honestly on the fence until about 3 or 4 years ago probably. Thought, you know, it doesn't pay every year. I mean, we know that fungicide does not pay every single time you use it, because there's a cost there, and so you got to make a couple bushels to make up for it. And if you don't see that, you know, you might think, well, why would I do this then if I'm only going to make a profit sometimes? But what I've seen in our research is, yeah, there are times, about a third of the time, maybe it's not profitable, but the 2/3 of the time it is profitable. You might see a 5 or 6 bushel increase in a lot of cases, and you know, clearly that pays, especially with $12, $13 beans.
On a soybean, there's only so much real estate. How do you determine how many treatments you can put on that?
Well, that's a little bit out of my realm of expertise, but yeah, you're absolutely right. There is limited real estate, and you have to make decisions. And you know, I think that the companies have done a really good job of coming up with packages that incorporate the most important things. So you need a little bit of fungicide. Insecticide is always important, especially in early planting. You know, when those early planted beans come out of the ground, if you're the first one, every bean leaf beetle in the county is going to come looking for your field. Right. So you want to have that insecticide on there. SDS is a problem in earlier planted beans, and so you want some SDS protection, whether it's Olivo or newer ones like Saltro, or you know, there might be some other products out there I'm not aware of. But you know, just make sure that you have, I would say at a minimum, those 3 components.
Well, you may not be aware of the food and agricultural revolution underway in Mount Pulaski. Farmers took matters into their own hands to establish a grocery store, and now they're creating a community kitchen and an industrial food processing plant, all to create institutional foods. Buckle your seatbelt. We're in the market on the hill in Mount Pulaski, and this is the new grocery store that's really a cooperative effort around the community. Tom Martin, who's a local farmer, kind of got this started along with some colleagues, but you've got Plan B here, or Step 2, I should say. What's happened? What's the next step in this process?
Yeah, this all happened about the same time. The conceptual idea of how we want to make our community in this area, not only Mount Pulaski area, but Central Illinois, kind of into local food, more local foods to help our young entrepreneurs get started, and also help provide food to not only the community but the whole area of fresh, healthy foods that are produced locally. And so our next step that we've been working on for 2.5 years now is the Farm-Fed Co-op, Central Illinois Farm-Fed Co-op.
Somebody who's got a garden with a lot of vegetables or fruits can make soup mixes or jellies, and then suddenly it's in here, and then it goes home.
Yeah, that concept is part of the community kitchen. All right, so our Farm-Fed has 2 basic purposes. One is a community kitchen, that would be exactly who we would be reaching out to. They can come in, make their products in the kitchen, and then take it out and sell it, you know, underneath their own label. The other part is a little bit more industrialized from the standpoint of we're looking to reach out to those larger producers like the Maddox Sweet Corn Farms and Foxpath Farms and others that really grow on a larger scale. But what we're trying to do is create for them that next level, that next step to be able to be year-round. They'll bring their produce in, and we will flash freeze it. So it's frozen the day it's harvested, and then we'll be able to provide that, store it in freezers, and provide that to hospitals, nursing homes, schools year-round.
Thanks to Tom Martin and his colleagues for the leadership in putting all of that together for the whole community. You're going to need some good weather for all of that, because there's a lot of food depends upon getting good weather for it.
You need some good weather, and you know, this winter so far hasn't been, you know, a harsh winter at all.
No, but there hadn't been much moisture, and that's needed. So.
Yes, and we're about to change that here.
Really?
We are seeing a pattern shift here. There's a major pattern shift that we haven't seen the whole winter, and it's going to start to take place here in February, and it's going to get a little bit more active for us, especially next week.
Okay.
So we need that,
right,
and it's coming our way here. And now, take a look here. The chance of precipitation, I've not put the chance of precipitation to widespread, close to area-wide for a long time. And Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week, we are going to see a big change here. Now, this is the precipitation total. This is taking into account rainfall, snowfall, and this is kind of over the next 7 days. In some areas, especially into southern Illinois and closer to, say, I-70, you're talking some 1.5 inch, maybe 2 inch amounts of total precipitation over the next week or so. Now, this is going to start out on Tuesday with, again, you look at that rain that is kind of setting up here. We're going to see rain that's going to transition to snow. This would be potentially our biggest snowfall of the season. Now that bar is really low because we haven't had hardly any snow at all this season, but it's looking like a system coming in here on Wednesday into Thursday is going to bring us not only rain, but snow as well. So we're finally getting some of that moisture that we have been lacking a lot here during the course of the winter. Let's kind of look beyond next week. Now we're looking into February 5th through the 11th. This blue, that's going to be your below average temperatures. Now that doesn't surprise me, because if we put down a snowpack, you're going to have colder temperatures, and that snow is going to be on the ground for a while. So we're going to keep things cold here. As far as the precipitation goes, after we get through next week, looks like the week after that does look below normal. So that's February 5th through the 11th as precipitation starts to come down a bit. But it does look like maybe some of the most moisture we have seen all winter coming in here next week.
Okay, so if we get some cool temperatures, we're going to need some more energy for livestock. Get some snow, we're going to need some more hay bales out there.
You're going to need the hay because you're going to have plenty of snow out there covering things up for sure.
All right, some questions for you next.
Welcome back to Midwest Ag This Week.
Well, I met the most delightful lady for an interview this last week. I'll never forget Dr. Temple Grandin, who had a major impact on the U.S. livestock industry and who's told the world about the autism that she's suffered from. She spoke to Farm Bureau's Young Leaders this past week in East Peoria. She had a lot to say about COVID's impact on meat processors.
Pig industry had terrible problems. When a couple of the big plants shut down, 300,000 head of pigs had to be destroyed on the farm. That was a real mess. And what this shows you about big is fragile. It doesn't matter whether it's animals, whether it's the chip industry, the glass industry, big is fragile. Now the thing about big is when it works fine. Really economical, really efficient, they can have good welfare, they can put out safe food, but when you break it, it's really bad. Now more distributed supply chain doesn't break as easily, but it'll be more expensive. So we need to be getting more small plants, and they need to be in a niche market such as local, because they cannot compete on price with the big ones. And you need to have both.
Need to have both, big and small.
Big and small, we need both. Because small is much more resilient, doesn't break as easily, but it is going to cost more. Doesn't matter what product it is.
Livestock producers, generally in taking care of their livestock, I mean, that's their welfare. That's their livelihood. They've got to do a good job And so the individual livestock producer generally probably would get a pretty good grade from you if you were grading.
Well, cattle handling, that has really improved. You know, the Cattlemen's Association's been working on workshops. That's improved. I'm a bit concerned right now about pushing animals too hard. We breed an animal just to make meat, and then you end up with leg problems. It's very important in cattle that you select bulls with good feet and legs, because if they're too straight or their ankles are collapsed, they walk on the dew claws, they're going to be lame. Okay. We have got to we have to look at what is the optimum, not the maximum, in genetic selection of cattle and pigs.
Okay, pigs the same way then?
Same thing. Pigs get the same leg problems. They were getting them back in the 90s, and when they were just breeding for rapid gain and gigantic loin and thin back fat, they ended up with leg problems.
Dr. Temple Grandin, somebody who's really special. University of Illinois Extension wants to know what farmers are needing from its staff and services. A statewide survey is being taken to determine those needs. And Extension's new agricultural program leader, Dr. Travis Burke, was at the Midwest Ag Expo several days back, visiting with farmers when we caught up with him.
The extension professionals here at U of I Extension got together and said, you know, we probably should get the pulse of what's going on with agriculture in the state of Illinois. So the purpose of it is just to get a broad view, a perspective of what the farmers are doing, different cultural practices, just do an overall needs assessment for agriculture in this state, and thought this would be a good time to do that.
Okay. The end game here is going to be what?
The end game is to hopefully get some ideas and some thoughts from the growers and homeowners and people around the state as to what direction we need to go in at University of Illinois Extension. We are not just doing the survey just to say, okay, we got the survey completed, now what? We basically have pointed direction as to what we'd like to do and prioritize some of the educational programming that we'll do in agriculture.
Is this taken online? Is that where it is?
It can be taken online, and I believe you can basically go to the U of I Extension website, and there'll be a link. And I believe that website is go.illinois.edu/agneeds.
And is there a deadline for completing this?
Well, the group has not set a deadline yet because we want to get as many respondents as possible. So for right now, the site is still up. It is still live, and people can go in and complete it. And we have not set a date to terminate the survey right now. One of the main things, Stu, is we would like people to know that this is very important for the future of agriculture in the state, and we want to emphasize the importance of all growers of any type to complete the survey.
The fellow behind me has taken a survey of all of the folks in the Chicago Board of Trade and knows what all the thinking is around the country about markets. Matt Bennett is with us. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing terrific, but I'll get better. Tell me, are the markets, where are we ending up the week at?
I'll tell you what, this corn market's rallied 20 cents on old crop. You've seen soybeans up 55 cents ish. You know, bottom line is this: we had a rally this week when a lot of folks felt like maybe we were starting to run out of steam. You know, you look up and you see December corn, almost 570 on the close for the week, and November beans over 1350. I mean, those are price levels that 4 to 6 weeks ago, I don't think a lot of folks thought that we'd see, especially whenever you're looking at soybeans. So we've been on quite a tear here lately. It sure has been nice to see.
Is the market buying acres, and whether one way or the other, farmers are going to start filling out that NASS survey pretty soon?
Well, you know, Stu, according to the January report, wheat acres are up 2 million this year. The other thing that you have to pay attention to, cotton has got to gain a few acres. I would think we've been running triple-digit cotton for several months now. A fair amount of money to be made in the Delta and in the Panhandle of Texas, planting cotton and in those areas. I've got to think that 180 million total is going to be tough to achieve, or at least to get above that. Typically, whenever you see big profit margins, yes, principal acres in total go up. But you've got to think that, you know, some of these other folks that are wanting the acres as well is going to maybe keep a lid on just how many acres we'll see. There's a whole host of ranges as to what these corn, you know, 93 and 87 for beans, I think ADM said this week, whereas a couple of the other ones we're talking the bean acres may actually be bigger than corn acres. My personal opinion is, oh, I don't know, maybe 91 corn and 89, 88 and a half on soybeans is kind of where I'm at for the time being.
We'll have to see. It's that's going to be the big question for the spring. Matt, good luck on your road trip all around the country speaking. So thank you very much for your help this afternoon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You bet. We appreciate Matt Bennett of agmarket.net. And we'll be back with bigger corn yields in a moment. Looking at agricultural association and organizations all around the state this week, we found ourselves in Mount Pulaski. As we look at the infrastructure of Illinois and a lot of the associations that make things work, we're honored to visit with Jeff Atkinson, who is Executive Vice President of the Grain and Feed Association of Illinois. And grain and feed has been around a long time.
Absolutely, Stu. Our history of our organization goes back, well, almost 130 years. It's 129th convention this year, so we've been around quite some time. The organization actually can trace its roots back to 1893. It was called the Illinois Grain Dealers Association at that point in time, and those were largely the private grain companies that were in business, and they kind of had an issue with some of those farmer companies that were being formed. They called them irregular grain dealers or irregular companies. And in 1971, they realized their interests were all fairly common, fairly aligned, and so they merged together and formed the Grain and Feed Association of Illinois. And so I think that's largely the you know, most people would want to refer to us as the Illinois Grain and Feed, but I think they didn't want to have a surviving entity, so they just referred to it as Grain and Feed Association of Illinois.
Well, tell me, what does Grain and Feed do? You've probably got a lot of things and a lot of clientele.
Yeah, our members are the grain elevators and feed dealers throughout the state of Illinois, naturally. And we have, just as in the founding documents and the founding purposes of the organization, was about sharing information. It was about providing an even playing field, a good business climate, grain grading, transportation. A lot of time back then it was really focused more on the railroads, and it still is. But we've evolved over time that we're still focused on those issues. But we've also added the regulatory and the things like OSHA and EPA and things of that nature. So that's a lot of what we still focus on today.
I have a feeling you spent some time in the state capitol, too.
We do. That's one of the main focuses of our organization is the government affairs. You know, I typically say our organization is kind of a three-legged stool. It's education, information, and government relations. You know, we're still in the business, as we have been for years, of providing education to our members. On the information side, providing them information on changes in regulations or changes in laws or things of that nature. And in addition, you know, on the government relations side, that the industry is regulated by the Illinois Department of Agriculture, there's the U.S. Warehouse Act, there's OSHA, there's EPA, there's all these various regulatory agencies. So we do get involved in government affairs and legislation as well.
All right. We appreciate Jeff Atkinson of Grain and Feed Association being with us, and right here at Elkhart Grain at Mount Pulaski. When we come back, you're going to want a notebook and a pencil. Another 50 bushels of corn would increase your profitability and may get you a corn grower's trophy. But Eric Winans says it takes a systems approach to achieve that. He's completing his graduate work with Dr. Fred Below over at the University of Illinois.
Here in Illinois and across the Corn Belt, there's a considerable yield gap. And the yield gap is the difference between the actual on-farm average yield and what obtainable yield is, what these yield contest winners are achieving. And so we set out to see what we could do with agronomic management to help close that yield gap and bring more bushels on the farm.
There's probably a lot of different things you could do.
Yeah, so it's a systems approach for sure. We're looking at things like better plant nutrition. That's really the foundation. Better plant fertility, bumping population up to take advantage of that fertility. Looking at narrow row spacings, which are a better arrangement of a higher density of plants, and then also protecting that yield that yield potential you set with foliar protection like fungicide and insecticide. Really what we've seen, it's not what you do that helps you, it's what you don't do that'll really set you back. It's a systems approach. Usually any one of those management factors are more important or I guess more valuable in a system than they are by themselves. So, something like, banded fertility, it's gonna bump your yield in a standard management system, but you're gonna see an even bigger value to that fertility if you're planting more plants and using that foliar protection. So everything sort of works synergistically together. If you don't have that fertility in place, you don't want to bump population up much beyond what's average here in Illinois today. We did 13 studies working with different seed brands. So we have different hybrids in there, and we did these 13 studies across 6 different environments. The average yield response to this enhanced management approach was 53 bushels. So that's combining fertilizer, some extra plants, and looking at narrow rows and that fungicide to protect the yield you set.
All right, now that 53 bushels, did that pay for the extra expense?
Yeah, 53 bushels will pay for a lot of inputs. The most expensive component of that's obviously going to be the fertility, especially in today's world. So that would be the one area, that would be a little hairy year to year, but most of those components will pay for themselves.
Eric says, put them all together slowly but surely. Don't pick out just one here and there. Well, that wraps up our show for this week. We appreciate you stopping by to join us. Hope you'll share some of the information with some of your farming colleagues, and we hope you'll be back right here again next week at this same time. I'm Stu Ellis. Thanks so much for joining us today.